300 million print books. 480 to 500 million ebooks. Approximately 800 million books total sold in 2025. Amazon is now the largest bookseller in the world, which is absolutely crazy. The last few years, their stats for book sales have been rising farther and farther and farther, despite the decline of brick and mortar stores like Barnes & Noble and Books A Million. Amazon continues to rise, creating more and more accessibility to books through their website all over the globe. Now, I am certainly not the first person to talk about Amazon on BookTube, and I certainly won't be the last, but I wanted to add some thoughts because over the last couple of years, I have really moved myself farther and farther away from purchases on Amazon as a platform, and I wanted to talk a little bit about why and how I am officially severing that cord as much as possible going forward into 2026. Amazon is now responsible for 50% of the total print books sold in the United States every year, which is absolutely crazy, but to be perfectly honest, does it really surprise anyone? Probably not. Amazon is also partially responsible for the exposure into the self-publishing community, with 31% of their ebooks sold last year being self-published. Now, of course, we do have to make the caveat on that while there are a ton of incredibly talented, amazing indie and self-published authors on the platform of Amazon, we've also seen a huge rise in the presence of AI products. And yes, I'm going to call them products, not books. That is a completely separate topic and one that could take its own video, so I'm going to leave that. We're going to shelve that for today. Now, I am definitely late to the leaving Amazon book purchasing bus for sure, but it's something that's been slowly building over the last few years for me, and I have already focused my book buying habits elsewhere, so Amazon hasn't been a massive part of my book buying for the last couple of years intentionally, but I'm going to make it even less that way going into 2026. Now, one of the things that I think is really important here is to talk a little bit about the pros of Amazon. And yes, I said it, the pros of Amazon, okay? I think it's really easy to focus 100% on the negatives of any given situation, whether it's about something like Amazon or anything else. And I do think that one thing Amazon has done for the book industry is they have really created more accessibility to books across the globe. And I think that that is something that we should all be wanting more of, because honestly, in the year 2026, it is still way too hard to get certain books to certain countries, from certain countries, translations, all of the things. And the more we can do to continually open up more books being read by more people from different places in the globe is a good thing. Another pro of Amazon is that it has given so many indie authors the ability to be seen on a large platform. And that is something that can't really be overstated, because as somebody who's been around the self-publishing community since I was the age of 14, it was very, very different back then. And the exposure that self-published authors were given then versus what they get now is night and day difference. Now, everything has strengths and weaknesses, right? So when you have a company that is as large as Amazon is, you're going to get everything that comes along with that. So why am I cutting ties with my book purchasing on Amazon? And, as an author who also sells their books through Amazon, this is something that I've reflected a lot on. I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, because there are definitely two sides to this discussion for me personally. More and more indie authors are building their own websites and selling direct, which I think is absolutely wonderful. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we go down further in the video. Right now, I'm not in a position where I can take my books off of Amazon. And I think that that's a really important key fact here, because while I'm going to talk a little bit about buying direct from indie authors, I also will put the caveat that if an author that I want to support only sells their books through Amazon, I will still be making that purchase to support them in whatever small way that I can. But let's get into why specifically I am going to be moving away from Amazon as much as possible going forward. The first thing that I want to talk about is their stance on AI, which is something that on this channel I have very, very little tolerance for as an author, as an artist who has seen how much AI has taken away from the arts and humanities. It's something that makes me very, very angry on a regular basis. I have a firm no AI stance in my writing, in my art. All of my books have human drawn and painted covers, and that will continue to be the case for as long as I am publishing books. Now, of course, AI is a rabbit hole, and I could spend the entire video just talking about AI. There are places where I do believe AI can be helpful. However, when it comes to the arts, I think specifically it takes away a lot more than it gives. And obviously, Amazon is more than fine with people uploading a ton of AI products under their book tabs and taking away exposure and space from real-life, breathing human artists who are putting their heart and soul into their craft and trying to gain readership. And I think that that's really gross, and I don't like it at all. The second problem I have with Amazon for myself personally is that it really perpetuates that impulse buying urge and also the idea of instant gratification, which is something that I think we've had so many conversations, right, about how our culture is so focused on instant gratification and needing things right now that oftentimes we lose the ability to slow down, to be intentional, to be thoughtful, and to think through everything that we are purchasing. And it's just so easy to click that button and it shows up at your house. I'm going to be saving a lot of money by not purchasing off of Amazon as much, because it is going to slow me down. It is going to make me be more thoughtful in those purchases, really have to go out, spend time on the websites, the bookstores, the author websites where I'm going to be purchasing the most. Whenever I can, I want to get to know the person that I am purchasing from. I want to be able to spend time in a book shopping website that represents some kind of brick and mortar store that is still bringing that bookstore experience to us, because I think that that is so precious and worth supporting and saving. Now, my third point is a big problem for those of us who are audiobook and ebook readers. And I know there's been a ton of content coming out about Audible and Amazon's stance about ownership of books that you purchase through Audible and through their ebook platform. So when you have a company that sells you something, you kind of assume that you then own that thing. However, on Amazon, you're basically paying for the ability to use their platform to read a book. And that's something that there's a lot of gray area there, right? So I want to know that when I purchase an ebook or when I purchase an audiobook, I'm just going to own it for the rest of my life. For however many times I want to listen to it, for whoever I want to listen to it with, I should know that I own that book. Now, when you purchase ebooks and audiobooks through Amazon, you technically don't own them. And if you are curious more about how that works, please look up some more videos on YouTube, because there are so many incredible content creators who have laid this out in detail and done a great job of explaining exactly how the process works. Now I'm going to get into a little bit of information about being an indie author on the platform of Amazon. So for those of you that don't know, indie authors get a tiny amount of their book sales on Amazon, which is why it is always encouraged to go and purchase the book directly from that author, especially if you're buying print. So for an example, my book, The Bloodstones, which is my first book in an epic fantasy series, it's 480 pages and it sells at paperback price for $21 on Amazon. Now, I can only speak for myself because I don't want to show anyone else's numbers up here, but I make maybe $3 at most per paperback purchase on Amazon, which means that Amazon is taking $18 of that sale. Now, of course, you have all of the overhead costs, you have the printing and all of that, but even knowing that and putting that aside, $3 or less per paperback sold for the author themselves is kind of incredibly crazy, right? So when you think about the level of support that indie authors are actually getting from their book sales through Amazon, if they're selling a ton of copies, that still adds up very quickly. However, it's still a huge chunk of money from their work that is going towards Amazon instead of the artists themselves. They also do not give us the ability to opt out of pretty much anything that they want to do with the books on their platform, which is for me an even bigger issue than the money. There's a recent AI addition to the Kindle e-reader devices where while you're reading through a book, you can ask the AI assistant any question you want about the book you're reading. Now, on first glance, you might be like, wow, that's really cool. I could learn more information or whatever the case may be. But here's the problem for me as an author. You could ask that AI any question you want about me as an author, about the book, about what the themes of the book we're trying to say, about any of these things you want that go a little bit deeper than the surface level of questions that we can ask about a book we're reading. And that AI can answer you, and I have no say in what it tells you. I have no say in wanting my books not to be scraped by their AI machine to create those answers. And having seen the way that AI responds to my work in the past, I can tell you without doubt that there will be some very incorrect answers, which as the artist makes me really annoyed. So that in and of itself, as an indie author, we are not able to opt out of having their AI programs scrape through our books and use that content for their own AI assistant services. As an indie author, it is getting really disheartening to see all of the different ways that these organizations and big corporations are continually telling me that my creative property isn't actually mine and they can do whatever they want with it. And that is something that I know is a huge issue for indie authors right now, and a lot of people are even pulling their books completely off of Amazon. Now, the hard part about that is a lot of authors are essentially trapped in a corner, right? Because that's where a lot of their exposure comes from and a large portion of their sales, especially if they're new to publishing. And it's really frustrating to see Amazon taking advantage of that. So anyways, let's talk about some of the fun parts of book buying and what my plans are going forward. So like I said before, one of my caveats to this is that if there is an indie author who only sells through Amazon and does not sell direct in any way, shape, or form, I am still going to purchase their book if I want to read it to support them in whatever small way that I can, because I don't want the indie authors to take the brunt of my frustration at Amazon if they don't have any other option available. 50 to 60% at least of my home library is already thrifted or secondhand purchases, and that's something that I love. I love a book with a story. I love a book with some history of wondering who read it before me, especially when I get a book that has some notes or annotations still in it. I absolutely love that. It's like having a conversation with the person who read the book before you, and I just think that that's such a cool thing. Older books that have been around, they've been a part of somebody's library, or they were a beloved favorite, is just, it's so cool that we can pass our books around that way. And I do love going into a secondhand bookstore because you literally never know what you're gonna get. And I think that element of spontaneity and surprise is something that, you know, we've lost when shopping on something like Amazon, because we have everything we want right at our fingertips, and sometimes it's really nice to go into that bookstore and not really know what you're going to come out with. Now, when it comes to buying new books, I'm going to be supporting my fellow authors as much as humanly possible and buying directly off their website or directly from them whenever I can, because I know that that pays them more for the work that they've put into their very loved craft. Now, I know that it is a really hot button topic right now, talking about going to the library versus owning your own books. And there's so many different fields of thought on this. So I'm just going to touch briefly on mine and how I support my library and also choose to own most of the books that I read. I think that we should absolutely support our libraries. We go there with our kids all the time. I take the kids to programs. I have donated books to my libraries before. I'm doing a presentation, an author presentation at my local library in February that I'm really, really excited to do. And I do occasionally check out books from my library as well, especially when it comes to books that I'm not as sure I'm going to enjoy, or I'm kind of waffling back and forth on, do I really want to read them? And I'll check the books out from the library and just kind of set them there to see if they grab my attention during the month. It is my personal philosophy that it is completely okay to own books, and I think that having a home library is a really beautiful privilege and gift, and it's something that I value a lot. I have friends who come to my house and they check out books, so to speak, and take them home and read them. It's a library that I can't wait to share more and more with my kids as they get older. And the books are something that just bring me and my husband a lot of joy in our lives. And also, I have a really hard time with library books just because there's something in my brain that sets a timer as soon as I get them and bring them home, where I have this weird weight and stress about, okay, I only have 2 weeks to get this done, which is silly because I read faster than that most of the time anyway. But also the fear of, if I dump water on a book and I own it, it's not anybody else's problem, right? I would feel the stress is just, for me personally, I prefer to own my books. But again, I do think that it is really important to, as much as you possibly can, support your local libraries and be part of what they're doing in their communities, because what's normal for me isn't going to be normal for everybody else. And there's going to be a lot of people that really value the ability to go to the library and read whatever book they would like. Moving into 2026 is going to be a really exciting year for me for book buying, and I hope for you guys too, and I'd love to hear your book buying philosophies down in the comments, so please share those. But as I've told you guys before in the last few videos at the end of this last year, I am going to limit my book purchases to 50 or less. I want to focus more on finding all of the books that I purchase secondhand whenever possible, or purchasing them again through the websites directly, whether that's from a brick and mortar store or from the author if it's an indie book. So yeah, that's my AI, Amazon, library, book buying ramble for today. I would love, again, to know you guys' thoughts down in the comments below. I also realized that I touched on a ton of topics through this video, so please be aware that I know I could have gone into much more depth with any of these points, but I just kind of wanted to do an overview of why I'm cutting ties with Amazon for book purchases, and why at some point in the future I would love to sell my books only directly. And with that, I do want to let you know that down in the description box below, you can find a link to my website, which is toritekhen.com. You can buy all of my books in print form off of my website if that is the way you prefer to read, and know that every single book is shipped directly from me, signed by me, packaged by me, sent to you with all the love and hopes for happy reading. So I hope that you guys are having a fantastic week. I hope you are reading some 5-star reads, and I will see you in the next video.